All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this show on the road here this morning. Are you all ready? All right. Let's hear it for Curry. Man, oh man, we've gone through COVID, we've postponed for a hurricane, and boy, you're all still here. I think maybe we're going to, you're like the Trekkies. Are we going to call you the Banders, or what are we going to do? I'm Nick Mueller, President and CEO Emeritus of the National World War II Museum, and I just want to welcome everybody here for this anniversary symposium and reunion. And what a better venue to celebrate in than where we are today. The United States Freedom Pavilion, the Boeing Center. A lot of you are longtime friends of the museum, been here numerous times and have attended other conferences and travel programs, been with us on the Easy Company from England to the Eagle's Nest with some of the featured guests who also participated on those programs. But we also see a lot of new faces, and welcome to all of you, and hope if you're the first time here, it won't be the last time. But you all are a testimony and a testament to the legacy of the HBO miniseries, Band of Brothers. An audience of this size, nothing more needs to be said. And there's 8,000 of you out there on live stream, and maybe many more by now. And so thank you all for tuning in. And sorry you can't be here with us. We just love it and appreciate your interest and support and keeping the stories of the Band of Brothers and World War II alive. Before we get started, and keeping with the tradition, I'd like to recognize World War II veterans and homefront workers and Holocaust survivors, but we have one special guest, and I know everybody wants to stand up and recognize the World War II veterans, but what we'd like to do is have you all stay seated so we can see the World War II veterans and recognize them and just clap. We have Mr. George McAlpin, Battle of the Bulge veteran, 35th Engineer Battalion. Where are you, George? Right here. There he is. Woo! George was with us for the 75th anniversary Battle of the Bulge tour, and we're so grateful you could join us. And any other veterans of World War II that might be here, please stand also. Homefront workers, Holocaust survivors. Well, sadly, we don't have any others with us. George, you're it. Thank you all, though, for being here. It's an honor to have you at the museum. I would like to ask veterans of all wars, active or inactive service right now, veterans and active service, please stand wherever you are. Thank you for your service. We always honor all of the people in the military, active or veterans, and this is a place where we honor them and you honor us by your presence. Becky Mackey, our Executive Vice President, should be doing this introduction right now, but she fell ill and is unable to join us. But she asked me to recognize a few other of our featured guests who were instrumental in helping to make this symposium a reality. So if you would please stand and others remain seated. Again, Kirk Sadusky of Playtone right over here. Kirk is also a member of presidential counselors of distinguished historians and museum leaders who meets with us once a year and helps to tell us what to do, what we're getting right, what we're getting wrong, and what we ought to be doing. So Kirk is hooked at the hip with us here. Thank you very much, Kirk, and any others from Playtone who are here. I know Amy's here, a few others. So thank you all. Michael Cudlett, who portrayed Denver Bull Randleman. Michael, where are you? Right here in front of me. Yeah. Frank John Hughes played Wild Bill Garnier. Ross McCall, who portrayed Joe Leapcott. There he is. And finally, though he's not with us today, Jimmy Matteo, who played Frank Perconte, was with us every step of the way in planning this symposium. So a big shout out and thank you to him. And I'd like to also mention and recognize Ed Tipper's daughter, Carrie Tipper. I don't know where you are, if you're here, wave or stand up, but you'll see her later on for sure. In any event, welcome to all of you and thank you. And thanks also to the entire other cast members and crew of Band of Brothers, as well as other family members of Easy Company who've joined for this important occasion. Well, there's a lot of people to thank, and especially I would say also our President and CEO, my successor, who happens to be in Normandy right now with the governor of Louisiana, so he could not be here as well. And our travel team, who had the idea to do this with Becky a number of years ago, and Kirk Sadusky and others who made it happen, and our Institute for the Study of War and Democracy, hooked at the hip also with this program. But we have sponsors too, and the reality is you can't do any of these things without some sponsors, and just let me list their names real quickly. Ryan Atkerson, Cameron Batchelor, Craig and Ann McDonald and their family of Lubbock, Texas. Rick and Kathy Ramsey and their son Sean, Jonathan, Reagan Rosenberger and the Miller families, Larry and Penny Schutt, Robert Sable, Richard Thacker, the Dallas Foundation, HBO, the Aviation Atlantic and Barrington Irving of the Flying Classroom, and Melvin, Caroline, and Jordan of the Galerie des Galatoires, where a few of you got to eat last night. Fabulous dinner with some of our featured cast, crew, and sponsors. And a big thank you to Hancock Whitney, our presenting sponsor, and without them, we might not be here. So thank you all again for your support, all of those sponsors, and I would like to also recognize, he'll come up in a few moments, Michael Bell. Dr. Michael Bell is our new executive director. It's not new anymore, I guess, since last October. And the Institute is a collection of great historians who inform everything we do here in the way of our programs, our tours, and our publications. And so we're just excited to have Michael on board. He was an armor officer, West Point grad, 33 years in the military, and had assignments at every level from platoon to Pentagon staff. And he's going to be your master of ceremonies today and will follow me in just a moment. So let's get this thing underway. I think I'm pretty much on schedule. Becky was going to introduce me, but I've already introduced myself, so you know who I am. And she had asked me to do a little fly-through of how this museum got started. Have had a little something to do with it, and you'll know a little bit more about that. It's only 15 minutes, so I've got to compress 33 years into 15 minutes, so it really is going to be a quick fly-through. And so let me get this going here, and there's Steve and myself, and so that gives you a clue. It came out of our friendship, but I'm going to run through about 9 slides really quick. They're all connected together, connected to the story. I think you'll figure it out as I go along. I'm not going to talk about them now, but of course you know that Higgins landing craft, Steve Ambrose in Normandy, that little gazebo in his backyard where we hung out too much in the 80s, drank too much. Research Park, where the museum was supposed to be. You know who that is. All right, let's hear it for Steve Ambrose and Dick Winter. Where we ended up. Some of you have been there, right across the street. Our ribbon cutting is June 6, 2000. You'll recognize some people there. Our master plan, and the brothers. So let's move on and go back to the story. So Steve Ambrose was my best friend in New Orleans. We're both in the history department, 71 till the day he died. His son Hugh, many of you know Hugh Ambrose, very much involved with the production of Band of Brothers with Kirk and others. And so it was this friendship. Now look, you just got to understand, we did everything together. Our families grew up together. We hiked, camped in the Rockies, traveled to Europe together, to Normandy, Central Europe. We were just used to doing things together. You know, he'd have an idea, I have an idea. I mean, I told him we got to buy a sailboat, a 40-footer. He didn't know how to sail. He said, well, how much is it going to cost? Well, $1,000. Well, how are we going to pay for it? I said, well, I'll start a sailing school, and we'll do it that way, and we'll hire some people to run it. And we did. Then we got into scuba diving. He says, well, let's buy a dive resort. So we did. Ran it for 5 years. And then owned a house together in St. John in the Virgin Islands. So just want you to know that we did one hell of a lot of things, and it was a common love of history, though, military and diplomatic, that drew us together, and we were used to doing big things. One of those were the tours that we did to Normandy. We started those in 1980, and I helped Steve organize it. I was doing international education for the University of New Orleans, and there's Major Howard from the Pegasus Bridge fame that you're seeing, and Steve talking there. And he started to meet people like Howard and other veterans along the way, and that led to him saying, let's start an Eisenhower Center for Leadership Studies at UNO. And I was a dean by then, and I said, okay, we'll find some space so he can get his oral histories transcribed. And he did over 1,000 of them by the time of our fateful conversation in 1990, and of course did the books on D-Day for 94 and Band of Brothers, Pegasus, Citizen Soldiers, all flowed out of those oral histories. And before I talk about this, I'll just say Band of Brothers, the Easy Company, we're in New Orleans around 89, 90 for a reunion. And Steve was collecting those stories, and he found out about they were here. And he went to the hotel room, and he kind of busted in there and said, I'm Steve Ambrose, and I'm collecting stories. I'm going to get yours, and I'm going to write the book. And he did. And that's his backyard. That was our Hewlett-Packard moment. All right, this is kind of how it happened. If anybody tells you any different, there were only two of us there. So now we started off with that cheap Gallo sherry that he always served every afternoon. No hard stuff, because we could go longer with that cheap sherry. And he said, I got an idea. So we're going to start a little small D-Day museum in your research park that you are building across right on the beaches where Andrew Higgins tested the landing craft. Ike told me, General Eisenhower, former president, that Andrew Higgins from New Orleans, who built those landing craft, was the man who won World War II because his boats enabled us to get over an open beach. We're here, hell with Congress. They're never going to do anything on World War II. We're just going to do it right here. And I've got 1,000 oral histories. My book on D-Day is coming out in 4 years, in 1994, for the anniversary. We're going to have that museum up. I said, Steve, that's great. Let's do it. Just like the sailboat, huh? So, well, he said, oh, good. That's great. It's only going to cost $1 million. I said, Steve, come on. You don't know anything about this kind of stuff. It's going to be at least $4 million. Oh, God, he said, no, can never raise that much money. Well, of course, the Higgins landing craft was the motivator. There's the research park, and you can see in the left corner there is penciled in the Higgins landing craft. And so that was the idea. Unlikely story, 33 years ago, that a couple of history professors sat down and thought, look, we were a little cocky. Steve had the big name, but we always got excited about bringing history to life. And this was a way he thought to preserve those stories. Easy Company, veterans of, all of the veterans of D-Day and Normandy and ultimately World War II. So we had a site, we had a cause, we had the Higgins connection, we had free land, and somebody said, well, if you don't get some money from Congress, you haven't got a chance. So I said, Steve, you got to go up and talk to our congressman. He did, and called me up right after the meeting, and he says, we got everything we need. I said, how much? He said, 4 million. I said, where'd you get that number? He said, from you. I said, that was over drinks. That wasn't a feasibility study. Anyway, it was enough. And a lot of ups and downs in the 90s. I mean, we went broke several times, and Steve had enough money. He kept the only secretary we had employed a couple of times, but we didn't know anything about building a museum. You know, we didn't know what we didn't know, what we were getting into. But we wrestled it to the ground. And 10 years and 20 million later, we opened across the street there, and some of you have been there. So that is the end of that story was just the start of another story. That's the warehouse on the right side, the Louisiana Memorial Pavilion, where we opened 10 years ago. And that was the opening right there. And you can see a lot of dignitaries there, the ones you'll recognize, Tom Hanks, and to the right, Steven Spielberg, Senator Landrieu, me and Steve, Secretary of Defense Cohen. It was an amazing 3 days. I mean, it wasn't just a ribbon cutting. We had 200,000 people on the streets of New Orleans. Were any of you there? Raise your hand if you were there. I know some of you were. See, look at how many people there. It's a day New Orleans and America will never forget. It was broadcast, televised, worldwide. Some 600 million people saw it. The people we had 80 trucks filled with D-Day veterans, and everybody on either side of the road was saying, thank you for your service. You saved democracy. You saved our freedom. It was quite a day, and went on after that to great success after we opened. And then Steve and I, that's the look, you know, we did it. We did it. Starting in that too much sherry. Anyhow, it was we said we're done, okay? We thought it was finished, we could relax, but then along came Senator Ted Stevens. Senator Stevens and Steve Ambrose were friends. And he said, look, you guys, you left out the China-Burma India Theater where I fought. And he was a distinguished Flying Cross, Army Air Corps. And Danny Inouye was in the Mediterranean. And he says, you left out the Mediterranean, you left out a lot of things. You just can't do D-Day. This is the best military museum in the country, but you've got to do the whole war. And if you guys agree to do that, I'll help. Well, we were a little bit reluctant, but we said we'd try. And I stepped down as chairman. I'd been chairman for a couple of years. By that time, I became president and CEO. And sadly, Steve died in 2002, so he did not live to see what you see around you. But he was there for the beginning of the dream and the beginning of the planning that resulted in this. $407 million capital campaign that just concluded after 23 years since we opened the D-Day Museum. The only thing connected to that early story and all those drinks is the 4 million and the $407 million. So the moral of the story is be careful how much you drink with your very best friend and a good idea. Today, Congress has, not today, but in 2004, designated this museum as the official museum for World War II, and by a congressional resolution, ranked number 3 or 4 as the most popular museum in America by TripAdvisor, and 7 or 8 most popular in the world. And before COVID hit, we were pushing toward 1 million visitors a year, and we're going to get there. So now I am president, CEO emeritus. I've got great people like Mike Bell, who in the Institute, this whole museum, who are carrying the vision forward. Stephen Watson, my successor, is going to finish the pavilion right out there. The last one, Liberation. And you know, Liberation was part of the Band of Brothers story at the end. The mission of this museum is to tell the American experience in the war that changed the world, why it was fought, how it was won, and what it means today. How do you answer the question, so what? So what 50 years from now, even today? Why was it important that we won that war? But we've always wanted to tell it through the eyes of those who were there. And that starts with Ambrose's book, and the Brothers, HBO miniseries, our exhibits, our programs, our tours, conferences, programs like this. It's still happening. And the personal stories are at the core of how this museum tells the story. We never lose sight of the values, of the courage, and the sacrifice in our exhibits, in our programs. They are always the beating heart of this museum. Now, Steve, of course, as I said earlier, interviewed Dick Winters. And I'm just going to read a clip from his interview. Most of you know it. He said this to Steve: "I was praying to live through it, praying that we wouldn't fail. Every man, I think, had up in his mind, how am I going to react under fire? You've never been tested under fire, and you hoped you'd become a soldier. You wouldn't disgrace yourself." Well, he had a lot of tests that he survived. One of them was at the intersection at Carentan. And I want to end my remarks with a little clip from Ed Tipper. And I want you to think about what Tipper says as you begin this wonderful program. Carrie Tipper is here, I hope, somewhere. And there she is, right there. Ed and I and his wife, Carrie, was at one of those events, and we did events here with you, Ambrose, out in Pebble Beach and up in the mountains of North Carolina. Wonderful, wonderful man. And he's one of those who inspired the actors that played the roles of the men of Easy Company. And you guys are going to be talking about this for the next day or two. I asked him once, I said, "Is there anything good you can tell me about Sobel?" He said, "No." First thing he said, "No, but he might have saved my life." I said, "How's that?" He said, all he could do, that man could run. He could run. He ran us to death up there in Toccoa. Ran. He says, and if it hadn't been the conditioning I was in, I never would have survived that blast in Carentan and made it to the beach. So he said, that's the best I can say. But let's hear from Ed.
The night of the invasion, y'all go out to the airfield. What's going on before y'all get in the plane? What's going on after you get in the plane?
Well, they gave us a last meal, like the condemned prisoners get, I think we had turkey Thanksgiving dinner. We had ice cream, which nobody had had for a couple of years. And but we took all that in stride. We joked about it. The main thing, I just can't stress too much, we were so confident that we were the best trained people in the world, that we could take on the Germans. I don't care what reputation they had. We were going to be successful probably against them. We expected high casualties, but we were willing to take those. We just were totally confident we could not be better prepared. Our training was so good. And that proved to be true, I think. When we were dropped, total chaos. The pilots flying our planes were not combat pilots at all. They were transport pilots. And when all the rockets and fire started coming up, the anti-aircraft, they panicked. The story is that they got confused over fog. I think they were confused the minute the shooting started. But anyway, most the pilot, I better talk about the pilot of my plane. The pilot of my plane was supposed to reduce his speed to 110 miles an hour from 180 or something. He didn't. To make the jump easier. He did not. He panicked. He opened and gave us the green light. That plane was going as fast as it would go. It was going so fast. When I jumped, my backpack was torn off my back by the impact of the opening shock. I lost everything I had in my pack. And yet still, it didn't bother me. Richard Winters, when he landed, all he had was a knife in his boot. Everything else was gone. I had a rifle. It was in 3 pieces, and it got to the ground with me. I got that put together quickly. And I had at least a rifle, and I had a bazooka that I threw away because I found out quickly it was not in working shape. No point in carrying it. And we had all these elaborate passwords, which the Germans would have had trouble with. Welcome. The German could not pronounce welcome very clearly. He pronounced it with a German accent. And thunder and flash were the 3 passwords. And what happened to me, we had these clickers too. I don't think any of our guys used the clickers. And very few of them needed to use the passwords. We all knew each other. The minute I landed, the guy that landed next to me close by hollered a tipper. He knew who I was. I looked at him, I knew who he was. We trained together for a year, well, almost 2 years. So I very quickly, 2 of us were looking for other stragglers or to form a group large enough to do some damage. And we did that. We wound up with about 17 or 18 men. There were no officers. That didn't matter. We could handle it. We had 1 sergeant. We had no automatic weapon. That didn't matter. We could handle that. The Germans were much more upset with this disorder than we were. And when we finally had enough men to attack something, that was our training, our mission, and we found a place to attack. And we attacked it with 18 men and took it very quickly.
There you have Ed Tipper, cocky and confident. That was a whole company was that way. So said they didn't use crickets, but the crickets were the way they found each other. The clickers, 1 click, and we use that sometimes, or I do in programs to say, when you hear 1, I want to get the answer from one of you all coming back here, because that's how we're going to bring us together. So all of you banders have a great program here. It's going to be a wonderful day, and I think I'm going to turn this over right now to Mike Bell, who's going to get us started with the first session. Thank you very much.